Good afternoon, dear friends. My name is Valerie Donna, and it is my pleasure to serve as your host this afternoon. On behalf of the local spiritual assembly of the Bahá'ís of the city of Brisbane, I warmly welcome you to this celebration of World Interfaith Harmony Week. We hope that you will find the program this afternoon uplifting and enlightening. We start our program with an acknowledgement of the Turrbal and Yagara people, the traditional owners of this land where we gather today. And we pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and future. And we recognize their custodianship and role in caring for this land for over thousands of years. May their strength and wisdom be with us today. Friends, whenever people of faith gather, it is always appropriate to start with a prayer. Let us pray. O God, my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. As we begin today, friends, we'd like to acknowledge a number of honored guests who are with us today. Mr. George Christensen, Member of Parliament, Member for Dawson. Dr. Amy McMahon, Member of Parliament for South Brisbane. Mr. Linus Power, Member of Parliament for Logan. Mr. Jim Madden, Member for Ipswich West. Councillor Lisa Atwood Dobie Ward. Councillor Kim Marks Runcorn Ward. Mr. Brian Codd, Assistant Commissioner and Acting Inspector Jackie Honeywood for the Queensland Police. Ms. Lisa Crawford for the Department of Home Affairs. Members of the United Nations Association Australia for Queensland. We'd also like to acknowledge our out-of-state guest from New South Wales, Northern Territory, South Australia, and Western Australia. We'd also like to acknowledge also the respected representatives from a wide range of faith communities, including Hindu, Buddhist, Jewish, Sikh, Christian, Quaker, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Muslim, and Celtic pagan traditions. And also a very warm welcome to our friends, colleagues, neighbors, and family members who are joining us today. World Interfaith Harmony Week was unanimously adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 20th of October, 2010. And henceforth, the first week of February has been observed as World Interharmony Faith Week, World Interharmony Week. I'll get it right. The resolution affirms that a mutual understanding and interreligious dialogue constitute important dimensions for a culture of peace. It further encourages states to support the spread of the message of interfaith harmony and goodwill based on the love of God and the love of the good and the love of one's neighbor. The World Interfaith Harmony Week provides a platform, 1 week a year, when all interfaith groups and other groups of goodwill can show the world what a powerful movement they are collectively. There are thousands of events organized around the world to celebrate this occasion. And this is one of those many celebrations that has brought us here today. The program this afternoon will focus on the theme, Crisis and Victory, how crisis brought us together. For the next hour or so, the program will include informative and inspiring presentations from a range of perspectives, as well as virtual choir presentations created during this pandemic. The following representatives from 8 different faith traditions will present on the theme, Crisis and Victory, how crisis brought us together. Habib Jamal, the president of the Islamic Council of Queensland, Mr. Kuldeep Singh, executive member of the World Sikh Parliament, the Reverend David Baker, General Secretary, Queensland Churches Together, Dr. Ashim Majumdar, Brisbane Chapter, Vedanta Center, Mr. Kim Hollow, Buddhist Council of Queensland, Mrs. Gail Peratz, Queensland Jewish Board of Deputies, Mrs. Linda Ward, the Queensland Pagan Hearth, Taryn Smith from the Brisbane Baha'i community. The presentations, dear friends, are offered in the order in which they were received. To keep the program flowing, I will not come up after each presentation. Throughout the program, you are invited to reflect with us on the positive contributions made by people of faith to the community harmony during the past year. We invite you to submit your comments or reflections that you wish to share. If time permits, at the end of the program, we will share some of your comments.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Almighty God be upon us all. As the world faces the greatest disruption of our lifetimes, Muslims throughout the world are also grappling with the repercussions of the coronavirus pandemic. But the Islamic cultural, spiritual, and theological dimensions offer Muslims many ways of coping. Islam is based on 5 main pillars, namely declaration of faith, daily prayer, fasting during Ramadan, pilgrimage, and charity. It is not uncommon for people of faith to strengthen their faith during times of crises, and as Muslims, this is exactly what we did. Daily compulsory prayers that at times could not be prayed in congregation at the mosques were still performed at home, thereby bringing family members closer. Our homes became our mosques. Ramadan 2020 was a huge challenge, a month of extra sacrifices and spirituality. Could not be performed at the mosque, so families adapted and homes became Ramadan venues. The annual pilgrimage to Mecca had to be cancelled in 2020. This is the first time in over 1400 years that the pilgrimage had to be called off due to a pandemic. For the sake of protecting fellow human beings, a gathering of over 3 million people at a single religious event would have been catastrophic. The pandemic brought Muslims and non-Muslims together in 2020, and from a Muslim viewpoint, there was no better time to capitalize on the rewards of being more charitable than during this pandemic. Several of our charity organizations based in Queensland went into overdrive and made huge sacrifices and efforts to help those in need. The year started with 12 organizations coming together, pooling their resources and donating $55,000 to the Queensland Country Women's Association to assist the victims of the devastating bushfires. A few weeks later, members of the Islamic Council of Queensland and Academy Alive drove to the Mogo village in New South Wales and delivered $25,000 worth of goods to the fire-ravaged villages in that area. During the year, one of the stalwarts in our community, Brother George Dean, delivered 4 million litres of water to the drought-stricken areas of Stanthorpe, Gatton, and Marburg. Further to this remarkable achievement, the Dean family, together with Muslim Charitable Foundation and Muslim Aid Australia, delivered more than 30 semi-trailers of hay. During Ramadan, 2 of our charity organizations, namely Sisters with Helping Hands and Brothers in Need, distributed more than 7,575 meals, food packs to individuals and families. All of this donated by well-wishers and businesses from our community. Brothers in Need and Merciful Servants Australia continue with Feeding the Homeless programs every weekend in the Brisbane area. Muslim Charitable Foundation, Muslim Aid Australia, Human Appeal Australia, iCare and Islamic Relief are some of the other organizations that continue to work within the broader community to ease the suffering of our fellow Australians, regardless of race or religion. Sometimes affliction inevitably comes our way. The Quran teaches Muslims to see life's difficult circumstances as a test. They are temporary hardships to strengthen us. Such a perspective allows Muslims to show resilience in times of hardship and tribulation, with sufficient strength to make it to the other side intact. Thank you.
एक ओंकार सतनाम करता पुरख निर्भव निर्वैर अकाल मूरत अजूनी सैभं गुर प्रसाद. One universal creator God, permeating the whole universal expanse, whose name is truth, creator being personified, without fear, without hatred, self-existent beyond birth and death by Guru's grace. According to my ideology, crisis is when we are disconnected from the whole. Living within the wholeness of one universal creator, there are no aliens or enemies, only we and ours. Everyone belongs to everyone else as a network. If someone is less fortunate than us, then we need to feel the pain and get together to help the less fortunate one. In this highly fragmented world of dog eat dog, we are split by race, color, creed, poverty, disease, and lack of education. Power, wealth, and beauty are driving the engine of exploitation. Everybody is on one pursuit, that is to become powerful, rich, and famous. Those who fail to achieve that are in crisis. Guru Nanak says the dark age of Kal Yug is the knife and the kings are butchers. Righteousness has sprouted wings and flown away. In this dark night of falsehood, the moon of truth is nowhere to be seen. From the teachings of Sikh religion, I would like to share two concepts with you. These two concepts can convert a crisis into victory. First is, O Nanak, through recitation of Naam, connect with the universal will and then engage in actions which will benefit the whole creation. We are suffering because we have neglected not only fellow human beings, but also fish, bird, animals, and plants. Whole creation comes together once they can see your actions are for the betterment of all. The second concept is embedded in the Sikh greeting, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, which translates to gracious enlightener God is always victorious, and those who can connect with his will are also victorious. I would like to conclude this with a small prayer. O gracious Lord Almighty, you are the source and cause of everything. O Lord, compassionate one, connect us with your will. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The Lord be with you. Well, necessity is the mother of invention. That's the phrase that comes to mind when I think of what I've heard about how the Christian church in Queensland has responded to the pandemic. Most church leaders complain that our faith communities are resistant to change, stuck in old patterns, and they won't change. And yet, with alacrity, when they could no longer gather physically for worship, they found ways to go online, ways to give pastoral support, ways of ministering to others that would never have happened without the pandemic. People who had gifts in technology, who'd been sitting back, came forward and led. We also found across the board that more people participated in our online worship than ever attended physically, sometimes by factors of 2 or 3 or even 10. People were looking for hope, for community, and they found it in our online worship services. Ministers and leaders were excited by the new possibilities of sharing the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. One example, one church that was moved by the plight of overseas students, while not having any in their congregation, still set up a ministry that supported them with practical support, with money and food, engaging their landlords and giving them pastoral support. This was simply based in compassion, in the core Christian belief that Christ came that we may have life, and life in all its fullness. That as followers of Christ, we are not to worry about our own needs, but to seek first the kingdom of heaven, the place where shalom, peace and justice flourishes in all that we do. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must thank the Baha'i Center for inviting me for this Interfaith Harmony Week. We all know that we are going through an unprecedented time. However, every calamity has two facets to it, both the good and the bad. Hinduism believes in the concept of ritu, which means balance. Nature always finds its balance, and through the several processes of adjustment, brings in balance to the world that we live in. The words of Sri Krishna comes to our mind whenever evil rises its head and virtue declines. I manifest as the destroyer of evils and rescuer of virtue. Intense greed, avarice, and accompanied destruction of nature around us has to be reined in, and harmony needs to be restored in today's world. As we are facing the situation of pandemic, we are here to learn or experience some important lessons from this. No matter where you are, who you are, do not be egoistic about this. All the wealth of the world, or name, power, position, and other qualities we are proud of, can withstand the wrath of nature. Respect all beings, including plants, animals, and others, as equal sharer of the world that we live in. Have faith in the intrinsic goodness of every being. Consider those who render service to us. In this case, the medical professional, the scientists, the technicians, ambulance staff, workers of various kinds as our saviors, and respect them for their selflessness. Also have faith in humanity. No single person is above another. Everyone has a function in the society, and the contribution of every individual grows towards our harmony and happiness. Develop faith in divine power. Sincere submission to the will of the divine helps us immensely to go through our trials and tribulations. Knowing that we are cared for and looked after by a power beyond our own. During this pandemic, we have seen people whom we generally do not pay much attention, like the carers, drivers, undertakers, technicians, and a whole of service providers who come forward to sacrifice their comfort, their life itself, to serve those who are affected by the pandemic. The pandemic also has shown us the power of sincere and wholehearted prayer. We know of members of our community who have come out of the hospital in good health after being pronounced as almost dead. The faith of such persons in the saving power of the divine gave them a boost. In addition, group prayers for those in distress has certainly shown that there is a greater power in prayer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. I'd first like to acknowledge the Brisbane Baha'i community for hosting this annual event, and Susan and all the tireless workers who've worked hard to put this together. I want to say a few words today, and before doing so, I wanted to acknowledge Dhamachiri Dhammananda for some of the presentation. This year, and for most of last year, the world community has been absorbed in a common experience of enormous suffering in the form of COVID-19. It continues to devastate lives and livelihoods across the globe. Science is our great informant today. However, faith and religion can have a positive influence to personally guide us in coming to terms with this pandemic. What does Buddhism have to offer its followers and the world to coping with this pandemic? How might a Buddhist response within the Buddhist view of life, and what aspects of Buddhist practice can support a positive response? Under these conditions, we find ourselves absorbed in a common experience of suffering. Previously, we have known many kinds of suffering, but often these were things other people or other countries suffered, not ourselves. The Buddhist perspective regards suffering as an ever-present common experience of human existence and recognises that we have a deep wish to avoid it. For Buddhists, the many sufferings of the COVID-19 experience are held in acceptance of the human condition. Common sufferings we can see are uncertainty and death. Faced with these possibilities, we may well experience denial, anger, anxiety, and many other frustrations. But it does not need to be this way. We can work collectively and individually with the great uncertainties and the shadow of death. Buddhist methods for cultivating mindfulness and practicing compassion, metta, can help us to overcome these underlying fears and anxieties of a new life with COVID-19. Fear, anger, and anxiety can take over our minds, colour our thoughts, and make it harder to see and feel our way through the issues of COVID-19. We need something simple that we can do at home to help restore a more grounded awareness of what is happening in our lives and develop a compassion that is big enough to hold all our collective responses. Buddhist practice centres around mindfulness, a grounded experience of mind, fully aware of our actions, speech and thoughts, and how our felt experiences, emotions and thoughts react to our predicament. We can start being mindful simply by being aware of our body as we quietly walk along. We can also practice our daily meditation, sitting quietly, carefully watching the breath come and go. Whatever we can do to be more mindful can help us to stem the receptive mindset that can arise from this crisis. Some traditional Buddhist countries have done well in the management of COVID-19. Vietnam, Cambodia and Thailand have remarkably low infection and death rates. We believe their success is in some way reflective of the worldview of the ordinary people. They have this deeper acceptance of suffering and emotional preparedness to deal with trauma, enjoying a more profound worldview of the interconnectedness, not just of all of the people, but of all sentient beings living on this planet. COVID-19 is no longer unprecedented. It is our new normal and will be with us for some time to come. Let us hope we can all truly learn how to deal with these new challenges with kindness, peace, mindfulness, and love towards everyone we encounter. Thank you.
Shalom Aleichem. Crisis and victory, how crisis brought us together. I took my little talk through the angle of communication. Communication is the key to keeping us together. For the Jewish community, despite centuries of slavery, exile, the loss of our homeland, oppression by cruel empires, destruction of our temple in Jerusalem by the Babylonians, firstly, and then the Romans, pogroms, blood libels, show trials, and the Shoah, or the Holocaust. The COVID-19 pandemic is yet another challenge to keep our faith strong and our people connected. In Brisbane, although our lifestyle has been curtailed by the pandemic, we have rallied to protect each other, to give each other sustenance in real food terms, as well as in spiritual, virtual terms. We conduct our lives as normally as we can and live with hope that things will be better. A synagogue is a place of worship and study, but it has always held another purpose. It is a meeting place. It is important at the end of each week on Friday evenings to meet at shul, the Yiddish word for synagogue, as Shabbat starts, and to chat with each other, to find out how we have all dealt with life over the past week. It is an important part of keeping a community connected. With lockdowns, we've had to implement pre-Shabbat Zoom services. Despite being in our own homes, Zoom has proved to be a highly successful way of connecting with each other, praying and singing together, and wishing each other Shabbat Shalom, or Sabbath peace, with a wave and a smile before we exit the Zoom. We have organised interesting talks, trivia competitions, and held AGMs by Zoom. Virtual get-togethers have kept us safe from infection, and plenty of people have answered the call to pray and celebrate together. A positive attitude and hope that a better world is possible, despite the serious challenges thrown our way, has always ensured that, in the words of the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, to be a Jew is to be an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. Judaism is a sustained struggle against the world that is, in the name of the world that could be, should be, but is not yet. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here come the claps. 1, 2, 3, and comes the singing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good afternoon. I am a solitary and somewhat reclusive pagan. My daily practices are solitary, personal, and experiential. I've always needed at least 3 reasons to leave my goddess country sanctuary. During 2020, and even now, I need 3 really good reasons to pass my gate. That does not mean that I am not part of my pagan community. I am blessed to love and be loved by other pagans, mainly solitaries, but most less reclusive than me, and by other than pagans. Our lives are interconnected in many ways. The pandemic has reinforced that interconnectedness. We have become more diligent in touching base with each other through social media, through talking on the phone, through being in each other's thoughts, through helping each other manage the challenges we have faced, COVID-related or otherwise. We have also become more diligent in being grateful for each other, for where we live, for the food we grow and share, for the seeds we save and share to sow next season, for our other than human companions who bring us so much joy, whether in lockdown or otherwise. Our gratitude has expanded to encompass our dedicated healthcare professionals in every area who have worked so hard to keep us safe. Our truly awesome scientists who achieved the impossible in creating vaccines so quickly. Even for some of our politicians who ever so briefly put aside partisanship to develop policies to protect us and show us what true collaborative government could look like. We have so much to be grateful for. The gratitude for what we have engenders hope for the future. Hope for the future gives us the strength to strive for a better world. And a better world is what we owe the generations to come. Blessed be.
In the last year, global events unprecedented in our lifetimes have resulted in a collective concern for the future of humanity. Uncertainty has required us to band together in acts of solidarity for our fellow man. While an international collective vision has remained elusive, individuals and communities have united in efforts to serve one another. The great pause on humanity has opened our eyes to the way we live and operate. The veil of the world has been pulled away, and an awareness of the dire need for rejuvenation of every aspect of society has been realized. Through every crisis, there is a greater victory. Baha'u'llah said, "In the beginning of every revelation, adversities have prevailed, which later on have been turned into great prosperity." Blessed by a government that responded quickly to the virus, we have continued social and community building efforts across Australia. Restrictions demanded Baha'i-inspired community projects adapt to a new reality. Creative methods to continue activities have naturally emerged through consultation and experimentation. The need for social cohesion at the grassroots level increased in importance and has thrived with a new energy. Social action projects, such as the community farm in Inala, where I live, are being developed in neighborhoods inspired by collective vision. In Brisbane and other areas, large-scale and systematic classes for the spiritual education of children are increasing in number and strength. In Queensland and across the nation, we have held discourses of world-embracing proportions across all sectors of society. We can draw inspiration from the knowledge that these efforts by like-minded people are flourishing across the globe in the face of calamitous adversity. I leave you with a quote by Abdul Baha: "Lift up your hearts above the present and look with eyes of faith to the future." Thank you.
A very gracious and sincere thank you to the presenters and to the participants this afternoon. Dear friends, this afternoon, we had the opportunity to hear the various perspectives of our fellow believers in faith and how their communities responded to this global pandemic that has brought the collective body of humanity to its knees. As we listened to the representatives of the different faith communities, we saw how religion and faith is a force of good and strength for the well-being of all humanity in times such as these. Habib Jamal shared how the Muslim community did not neglect the compulsory prayer, but moved from the mosques to the homes, and that brought families closer together, and how various Muslim charity organizations reached out to those in need. He shared with us the Quranic teaching to see life's difficult circumstances as tests, that they are temporary hardships that only strengthen us. Kudeep Singh reminded us that we're all interconnected and that everyone belongs to everyone else in this network. He called upon us to reflect that we need to feel the pain of others that are less fortunate than ourselves and come together to help them. He reminded us that God is always victorious, and those who connect with his will also be victorious. The Reverend David Baker shared how his Christian community defied assumptions that faith communities are resistant to change and found ways to worship and minister to others in ways that would not have been possible before COVID-19. And he told us how the Christian churches offered both material and pastoral support to those who were not affiliated with any congregation. Dr. Ashim Majumdar reminded us that every calamity has two facets to it, the good and the bad, and that according to the Hindu concept of Rita, balance, nature will find its balance through processes and adjustments in the world in which we live. He shared the words of Krishna about our actions that have brought about the conditions in the world today and our need to restore harmony. Mr. Kim Hollow shared that faith and religion have had a positive influence to personally guide us to coming to terms with the pandemic. And that in this pandemic, we find ourselves in a common experience of suffering. He shared that we can work collectively and individually to help us overcome the fears and anxieties, and how adherence to Buddhist practices such as meditation and mindfulness may have indeed helped countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand to keep their numbers down. Mrs. Gail Perrott shared that the Jewish community has rallied to protect one another and to provide both spiritual and material sustenance. She told us how her community learned to implement Zoom pre-Shabbat services and have virtual get-togethers and organize interesting talks via Zoom. She shared that there is a positive attitude and hope that a better world is possible, because she said to be a Jew is an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. Mrs. Linda Ward reminded us that our lives are interconnected in many ways, and that the current crisis has reinforced that interconnectedness, that we have become more diligent in touching base with one another. She shared that we have much to be grateful for what we have, and that such gratitude gives us hope for the future, and hope for the future gives us strength to strive for a better world. Taryn shared with us the Baha'i community's response to this unprecedented global crisis affecting human society. He shared the Baha'i belief that for every crisis, there is a greater victory. He shared with us how the restrictions demanded that the Baha'i-inspired community projects in which the Baha'i community is engaged in found creative and experimental ways to provide a strength to the community, and how he was inspired, their community was inspired by the collective vision of social cohesion and how that increased in importance during this time, and how the spiritual education of children grew in strength and numbers, and how adherents of the Baha'i faith have engaged in discourses with others about the global importance of working together. Dear friends, what we heard today from various faith presenters was that their communities did not dwell on COVID, but looked to their faith traditions and teachings to give them hope and a sincere belief that victory was achievable. Each of the presenters has reaffirmed a fundamental belief that whatever the suffering and turmoil of the present and foreseeable future, humanity can confront this with confidence in the ultimate victory. And as the presenters shared, people of belief have used their faith teachings to see beyond the immediate situation. Explicit in the presentations is the important role of faith in responding to tests that beset humanity. This is vitally important to remember. While we have been blessed with an astonishing and rapid advancement in technology to eliminate this virus, it is the intellect that was given by the divine that enabled us to achieve this, and the social cohesion of people of faith that served to stabilize the communities as we awaited a solution. But also, dear friends, we believing people of faith must continue to exercise a significant role in society for the advancement of the well-being of all humanity. Several presenters reminded us that there is a universal crisis of greater magnitude and more pervasive than COVID, which requires us to reevaluate our current assumptions about humanity and our world. COVID unmasked the global crisis confronting us all, the crisis of poverty, prejudice, astounding accumulations of wealth, inequality at all levels of society, injustice, lack of access to education, damage to the climate and the world in which we live. No lasting peace can be achieved in this world until humanity addresses this universal crisis. There are many in the world who already acknowledge that COVID really ripped away the veneer of a world sorely in need of a transformation. For example, at the recent World Economic Forum, Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, spoke of the unprecedented declines in health, social, and economics in proportions not seen since the Great Depression. He said that the world is at a crossroads and that we must act together, that the challenges created by COVID-19 were created by us. He averred that we should forge a new path of design to a world that is just, peaceful, cohesive, resilient, and sustainable, and that this requires collective action. Who better to lead that transformation than people of faith? No serious attempt to set human affairs in order to achieve world peace can ignore religion. Writing of religion as a social force, Baha'u'llah said, "Religion is the greatest means for the establishment of order and for the peaceful contentment of all that dwell therein." The Baha'i community seeks, in accordance with the specific directive of Baha'u'llah, to consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship, to join with its co-believers in faith in challenging current assumptions about humanity, and to begin the discourse based on the core teachings of our respective faiths, each of which was designed to advance humanity and the nobility of the human spirit. Have not the divine educators of our respective religions been agents of the advancement of civilization? Then are not those of us who profess belief in their teachings the moral stewards of society? Are we not a potent social force that can make a lasting contribution to the elimination of the global crisis? Our various responses to the COVID pandemic have given us a glimpse of what people of faith can do in times of crisis. Experience has taught us that when groups of people band together for a common cause, usually a goal that will benefit society as a whole, much is accomplished. Let us in the faith communities begin that process. Let us, true to the teachings of our sacred scriptures, take our rightful place in bringing about a peaceful, sustainable world. Dear friends, we thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we hope that you have had an opportunity to reflect on what we in the faith community are able to achieve and how we might go about achieving that by beginning to engage in discourse with one another. Thank you.
To the countenance of truth, a breath of life to the body of mankind.
Thank you so much, dear friends, for joining us this afternoon. We have, as we have indicated in the beginning, invited comments. And we wanted to share with you some of the comments that we have received. And we thank you for taking that opportunity to share your thoughts with us. One of our participants, one of the guests in our audience says, sincere thanks for organizing this event, being able to share the positive messages from each faith to help us sustain us throughout these difficult times. Another one of those in attendance says, we have been blessed by technology in continuing our connections despite social distancing. Let our constant prayer be, gracious God, connect us with your will. Another is, This was a great reflection of spiritual commitment, as well as showing or showcasing the great community contributions made by various faith groups during this time of crisis. Another comment, this is real strength in numbers, especially when we are united in doing good things. Thank you very much, dear friends, for those wonderful comments. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the technical assistance that's made this possible by Kate Shepard and Eric Weston, and they have done a great job with their training in technology to be able to bring this to you. We also have heard that we had 46 people in attendance on Zoom and 17 live stream. What the wonders of technology can bring to us and how we're able to connect and be with one another at this particular time. Once again, friends, thank you so much for your participation, and go with God. Thank you.